So I've had this FossiBot F2400 portable power station for about 2 months now. And I've used it for supplemental power during a move, as well as to power tools and devices in my garage. FossiBot sent me this power station to use in an upcoming no-build minivan camper conversion that I'm working on with some friends. And so ultimately this power station will end up inside of their no-build minivan camper conversion. But I figured while I have access to this power station, I'm gonna go ahead and run it through the standard tests that I normally do when I test these power stations. So let's get this power station down in the studio and run some tests on it. Please forgive me as I have recently moved and I'm now setting up a new studio to do these power station videos. And in today's video, I want to go over all the specs and features of the FossiBot F2400 portable power station. This F2400 is a little bit of a unique power station because it does have some features that I don't normally find in power stations of this size. For example, this power station is rated to put out a continuous 2400 watts from its AC inverter with surges up to 4800 watts. In addition to that, it does have a 2048 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery, which has become the gold standard of battery chemistry over the last year or so. I'll get into all the bells and whistles in a minute here, but the first thing I want to point out, which is the most unique feature of this power station, is this dial. This knob is unique because you can control the amount of power coming into the device from your wall charger. The device currently has 87% in it, and it shows 550, and I'm gonna dial it all the way down to the bottom. And the lowest setting that you can use for recharge is the 300 watt setting. Now, if you look here, it is getting a little less than that 300 watt setting because the state of charge of the battery is so high that the device is not charging at that maximum rate. If I dial it all the way up to its 1100 watt rating, then it still gives me about 550 watts at this 87% state of charge. If I plug this in and the FossiBot F2400 was completely empty, you would be getting that 1100 watts into the device. Being able to control the AC input on the power station is perfect for the option of charging as fast as you can when you have emergency situations in which you need to charge so fast, or lowering that recharge rate so that if you're not in a rush, you can allow the battery to charge at a lower wattage so you don't cause unnecessary wear and tear on the battery. This brings me to another set of interesting features on this power station. There are fan covers on both sides of the device, as well as covers for the inputs and the outputs. This is interesting to me because it does add an extra step for the user, in which if you are charging this at its highest rate of charge, you are going to want these flaps open so you don't overheat the device. It is one more step that the user has to take to make sure that they're using this device correctly. It also offers the added protection of preventing dust when in transit and not in use from entering the device, as well as keeping water or moisture out in the event of this thing being left out in the rain. So far, I am satisfied with the quality of these covers, except for the input cover. It no longer snaps closed. I don't know if that's because I jostled it or if the device just does not want to close. And in fact, for my uses, I feel like this top cover is plenty if I'm worried about rain, so I could possibly pull this cover off if I don't need it. While I'm down here on the input cover, it will take up to 1100 watts from a wall outlet and up to 500 watts from solar panel. The Anderson Power Pole input is compatible with between 11 and 50 volts of input. So for most applications, you shouldn't really find overvoltage to be a problem unless you have a really unique solar panel setup. Moving over to the front of the device, we do have a couple of different 12 volt DC outlets. The first one is your standard car style outlet, and that's rated for 12 volts and 10 amps or about 120 watts. But more impressive than that is this XT60 output rated at 12 volts and 25 amps. So you could pull quite a bit of power from this output. In addition to that, you do have two 5521 3 amp outlets. There is a light feature on the front of the device. There's also plenty of USB outlets, with 2 standard old school USB-A outlets and 4 USB-C outlets, all power delivery outlets. For a device of this size, this is actually a significant number of USB-C outlets, and I'm pretty pleased to see that on this device. Finally, one of the best features of the F2400 are these 6 110 volt AC outlets. Because this device is sold in the US and Japan, you can change the output of these from 100 volts to 110 volts. Plus, I don't expect to ever encounter this need, but if you long press the AC input, you can cycle this between a 60 hertz or a 50 hertz system. For my use, I'll go ahead and leave it on 60 hertz here in the United States. By tapping the AC button 10 times quickly, you will be able to cycle the device between 100 and 110 volts. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on 110 volts, but there may be some uses where you might only need the 100 volts and you'll actually save a little bit of power by having that lower voltage on your output. But you have to note, if you do run this at 100 volts, the device that you're running may not run as you expect it to. So only do that if you really need to save some power and you have continuous load devices that you want to run, such as hot plates or maybe coffee makers. This is the AC inverter test. In this test, I'm gonna run my water kettle and this hot plate to achieve about a 2400 watt draw from this device. The hot plate pulls about 1400 watts when it's running, and this kettle pulls just under 1000. So combined, I should be getting just under 2400 watts, which it looks like I'm getting 2200 watts right now. So I'm gonna add one more device to this test. This small MyHeat heater should put me just over the 2400 watt limit, but I'm still just under 2400 watts. So let's see if I can put one more 50 or so watt device on this machine to see if it will pull the 2400 watts. My water's almost boiling and I'm actually pulling about 2400 watts now. The water kettle says it's at 101 degrees Fahrenheit and I can just see the bubbles on the bottom of this pan. In this short 5-minute period, I have pulled around 5% of the power out of the device. I believe I should be overloading this AC inverter, but it doesn't seem to be going above that 2400 watt limit. With this massive load, I do want to check and see what the voltage is. I'm going to plug in this voltage meter and just see if I'm still getting 110 volts. So what's happening here is as I'm hitting that 2400 watt limit, the voltage is dropping a little bit. I'm currently showing 102 volts on my voltmeter. I do use this for all of my tests, so it should be about standard. I'm boiling water here. I'm just about to boil water there. The MyHeat heater is still running. I'm pulling just at that 2400 watt limit and I'm showing 107 volts on the display here. I would say overall the FossiBot F2400 passed the AC inverter test. What I want to do now is charge it back up and then do a complete battery rundown test. I usually like to get between 80 and 90% conversion from the stated battery capacity to what I actually pull out of the device. So if I can get somewhere between 16 and 1800 watts from this device, I'll be satisfied with it. We just hit 100% state of charge on the device and it stopped charging. And I already set up my heat gun to pull about 400 watts from this device. Now I'm going to do a 0.2C state of charge rundown test. This test will let me know about what I can expect to get as far as battery capacity. To start the test, I'm going to turn on the AC outlet. I'm going to turn on the heat gun. I've got about 420 watts coming from the FossiBot. My heat gun will either hit around 360 or 420, so I'm opting for 420. The ideal power draw for a 0.2C discharge test is 409 watts, so this is about as good as it's going to get for this test. The test says it'll take about 4 hours to complete, so I'll check back in and see if it lasts 4 hours. We got 1,734 watt hours from this 2,048 watt hour battery. That's a pretty good result, coming in at around 85% conversion from this lithium iron phosphate device. Overall, the FossiBot F2400 has come in pretty decently in my testing. I was about to give some closing thoughts on this power station and I remembered it does have this panel in the top, and inside this panel it has some of the cables that came with it. First I have the car charging cable, which can be used to pull in about 100 watts from a car. Plus it came with MC4 cables to connect to your solar panel. So inside of the box you have the owner's manual and these 3 cables. The 2 that I just showed you, plus the standard AC wall charging cable. I do have some thoughts about this device after having it and testing it for about 2 months now. First of all, I do want to thank FossiBot for sending me this device for that van build that I'll be doing that you'll be able to see on my channel in the next few weeks. They were not expecting me to make any kind of video about this product. And while I've been using it and testing it over the last several weeks, I thought that it was good enough that it would be worth making a short video about. It is a very good budget deal for this size of power station. It comes in at just around $1,300 today, and that's off of its MSRP of $1,600. Be sure to check the links in the video description to see if there's any change in the price or get any current information about the product. Finally, I feel like this is a decent product for its size, its budget, and what it does. It works well for the things that it's supposed to do, and it has that lithium iron phosphate battery, which should last up to about 10 years or give you about 3,500 complete discharge cycles with 80% of the battery's capacity remaining. If I was FossiBot and I was gonna make this power station again, I'd probably eliminate or remove some of these flaps. They're perfect for keeping dust out and keeping rain out, but they do add that additional step for the consumer where they have to be open while the device is charging or in use to prevent overheating. Additionally, the knob is a cool retro feature that, we haven't seen in devices for quite a long time. But you have this knob for digitally controlling the input to the device. And then over on the side, you have a button sequence for changing the input voltage and the frequency. Some people might love these knobs, and it is a really cool touch, but it might be unnecessary for the device. The last feature I'll discuss is the display. It's a pretty simple display. It's functional. It shows how much power is going in, how much power is going out, as well as which of the devices are powered on. So it does everything it needs to do. It's monochrome and it's visible enough that you won't be squinting too hard to see it in sunlight. Thank you for checking out my quick video review. And as always, a sub to the channel would be electrifying.